Hello, Millennium Live listeners. Welcome back to the Millennium Alliance podcast. It's great to have you here. And today I am very excited for this chat because we have, and for me, my first CRO related podcast. We've done so many different cybersecurity, healthcare, marketing, HR and benefits, leadership. And in healthcare, we've dove into providers and payers and digital health. We've talked a lot about AI on this podcast. And so finally, I'm very happy to have a CRO focused episode lined up for our audience and members who have joined now the Millennium Alliance in hopes for finding solutions to their revenue side of the business. This is Commissions 2.0, a new era of performance-driven compensation from byproduct to catalyst, aligning commissions with business goals. And we have a great partner with us that is really at the forefront, the charge of this quest. QuotaPath is sponsoring this Millennium Live podcast, and we have two of the experts, leaders that are heading up QuotaPath and really leading this charge in the CRO realm. First, I want to introduce AJ Bruno. He is the founder and CEO of QuotaPath, a commission automation platform, and he's also is one third of another podcast, a revenue focused podcast, Top Line, which we could even dive into later on in this podcast. AJ, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here. It's great to have you jump on another podcast and talk about QuotaPath and all the cool work that you've started and are able to pass along your knowledge to our audience. So welcome aboard.
Well, thanks, Connor, for having both of us, Ryan and myself, and leading the charge. I think you said leading the charge three times. So we better be charging in this podcast episode. We're charging somewhere, Ryan. But
Yeah.
yeah, I appreciate having being on the podcast and just a kind of quick background on my revenue experience, revenue leadership experience. Second time founder. My first company was a company called Trendkite based in Austin, Texas. B2B SaaS, led a team of about 150 sellers, unruly sellers, inside sales team. You can think back to the mid 2000s, 2015 and 16. And it was all the craziness that came with that type of team, all based in Austin, Texas. And from that experience, which we'll talk a little bit about, came across this at the time it was a niche industry of incentive compensation management. It's definitely changed. The category has evolved quite a bit, and we're happy to be leading that charge and evolving with it. Ryan is my VP of Sales and Operations, and he's actually a CRO finalist of the year. So he's a esteemed colleague, and Ryan and I have been working together for the last 3 years. Ryan, are we coming up on?
Yeah, coming
Yeah.
on 3 years.
Ryan started as actually the director of revenue operations, but couldn't hold him down, and he has taken all things go to market on, and I'm sure he'll talk a little bit about that during the episode. But again, thanks, Connor, for having me.
Yes, thank you, AJ. And of course, it's a revenue podcast. Might as well say charge a couple of times and see where that goes. Ryan Milligan, he is the VP of Revenue Operations at QuotaPath. Thank you so much for joining. You're leading the commission automation tool that is really helping uh, plan to drive that revenue for businesses. Uh, as you mentioned, AJ, he's led RevOps, account management, sales, all during his time at QuotaPath. And I believe in a past life was a data scientist and a digital marketer. So, Ryan, wealth of knowledge and experience. Welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you as well.
Yeah, Connor, thanks so much for having me. It's a really fun role, using a product that automates the process of calculating and paying commissions. As someone who is responsible for calculating and paying commissions, I get to dog food it a lot, which is a really great experience. And I think what I'm really excited about what we're doing is, and we'll talk about this a little bit more on the podcast, but allowing teams to use their comp plan as a tool to drive revenue outcomes. I've been in a number of orgs where commissions and compensation plans have been calculated in these ivory tower Excels well after the quarter has ended. Your sales team has no understanding of how they're earning commissions. And so the comp plan isn't motivating. It's just this after the fact kind of byproduct. What we're trying to do here is allow go-to-market teams and empower them, in fact, to use their compensation plan as a tool in real time to drive a team member, a sales rep, a BDR, drive their decision making. Hey, I should go close this deal because it's going to earn me more money. It's going to earn me more money, so I'm happy because it's better for the business. So how do you actually use your comp plan as a performance driver versus this after the fact byproduct? And so it's been a fun change in thinking in the market, driving change is the theme of the conversation. It's been a fun change of thinking that we have pushed into the market and that buyers and customers are really excited about as well.
I love how Ryan describes Excel as an ivory tower. I want to put that prompt into ChatGPT. What does an ivory tower of Excel look like as an image, right?
There's something about being safe in Excel and having your long if-then chain of formulas, and you can just sit with your cup of coffee and there's
Ivory
not great
tower.
things about that, but there is something
I
beautiful
agree.
about that.
I agree.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, this is and thank you both. 'Cause this is going to be a very fun conversation, and I'm excited to dive in. We're going to be addressing it. Well, AJ and Ryan will certainly be addressing a number of pressing questions in this space, including the spark for this need for a reimagined approach to commissions and compensation and the modern compensation plans that are different than what enterprises are used to in their traditional structures, the challenges that companies have in adopting this new approach and how they can overcome them. And I believe how QuotaPath really can really drive that change. And we'll also get to aligning commissions with business objectives and how that can really transform the relationship between sales, operations, and finance teams. So if you're looking for strategies to fuel growth, enhance team alignment, and ensure that compensation plans are both future-proof and performance-driven, you are certainly in the right place. So turning to the experts now, I want to start with you, AJ, and I feel like a great way to start is to as I just mentioned in this intro, identifying the need for a new approach. Uh, how do you identify the need for a new approach to commissions and compensation planning? And how does QuotaPath perhaps fit into this equation?
Yeah, I think Connor, as founders, one of the things I just think about every single day is just the problems to be solved and just the experiences that I have and what I'm doing day to day and running a high powered team, a sales team in 2015 where everyone was just constantly hitting quota. Some of the things that you would stand up operationally were just like not, let's just not worry about them. Of course, we had Salesforce, and of course we had a lot of the things that would help us in outbound and making sure that we were driving the right leads. But compensation wasn't something that I thought a lot about because we were just moving so fast. Until one quarter, end of the quarter, I'll never forget, we have someone on our team. Her name is Alex Brennan. She goes by Simba. And of course she does. So Simba approached me. She works at QuotaPath too, but she approached me one day at TrendKite, the end of the quarter, and she said, AJ, I think I got paid wrong. I got paid incorrectly. And that just like hit. Just imagine you're doing the best you can. You've crushed a quarter and you see your paycheck. It comes in and it's half the amount that you thought it was going to be. How frustrating of an experience that is. And that happens to sales teams across the country. We've all been there. But when you're the founder of the company, you don't expect that to happen to you. So the first thing I was like, okay, Simba, like, why are we, whatever, fine. Let me go figure this out. So I went to our VP of finance and I said, Sam, what is going on? We need to fix this. Like, have to get this fixed. Sam's like, AJ, are you kidding me? We closed the books. This is a revenue operations issue. Go to Cole. Cole's actually my co-founder at QuotaPath, but he was the director of revenue operations. It's a family affair here at QuotaPath. So I went to Cole and I was, Cole, can you fix this? Cole's like, I don't let me look at it. Oh, I see what happened. We split this deal here. Yeah, but I have to go reconcile it. So you have to go to the controller. I have to go to the controller. This was like a week back and forth. Meanwhile, poor
Mm.
Simba is sitting there with missing half of her paycheck that she thought she was going to have. Again, really frustrating experience. So we took a step back and said, what are we trying to solve here? Let's look at this spreadsheet and just solve all of the errors and the formulas that were just problematic quarterly. Like we found $10,000 worth of errors just because of that situation. I was like, okay, there's
Wow.
got to be a better way to do this. Got to be a better way to figure this out. So we went out to the market. Turns out there wasn't a great way to do this. There was a tool that was very professional services that I won't mention by name, but super enterprise. We paid like $50,000 in inflation terms. That would be like $100,000 today. So we paid for this tool and we couldn't even get all the plans. We couldn't get the SDR plans because they only dealt with currency. They didn't have numbers. And then we found out we were paying a different tier. So we went to a different tier and couldn't figure it out. And we ripped it out within 6 months. Most frustrating experience I've had in my professional career. And so when there's a most frustrating experience you've had in your professional career as a founder, you think, well, this is an opportunity. This is a moment. I can change this. I'm going to have a chip on my shoulder and fix this problem and allow the sales team to get that visibility that is much needed. So in 2018, after my previous company had sold, I didn't even take a break, was like, okay, I have to fix this. I okay, look at this. We're just charging everywhere today. Just went charged right at the thing. And here we are 6 years later. Startup world, that's a long time. And we've had a lot of evolution that we'll talk to and that Ryan's been a part of. But that was the genesis of the beginnings of QuotaPath back in 2018.
Well, and I think it's really interesting, Connor, you asked the question about how do you realize you need to solve the problem? And AJ comes at it from the founder perspective of how do you solve the problem with QuotaPath. I would add to it, we're gonna talk to a lot of CROs in Millennium Alliance in a couple of weeks, and they're going to be asking us, how do I know that I need to solve this problem for my business? And I think some of the themes for AJ, one is, errors in calculations breed a lot of mistrust in your team, but even a step further, those comp plans aren't determining how a person is behaving in real time. And if anything, they're actually guiding team members towards the wrong behavior. So if you don't have a compensation plan that tells a team member, hey, this is what great revenue looks like. 3-year new business contracts with 3 products bundled that have this payment terms. If you're not telling your seller what great looks like, and you're taking half of their take-home pay and basically doing nothing to motivate them with it, besides just paying them a flat rate across all their types of different deals, you are not using the comp plan to its best potential. And you're spending a lot of money. Think about all your sellers, hundreds of thousands of sellers, half their take-home pay. You're spending in a comp plan that's not motivating them to do anything that's great for your business. And I've talked to so many teams and so many leaders who are frustrated by the type of revenue that their sellers are bringing in. And the truth is, it's because their sellers are being motivated to bring in easy, low-hanging revenue, right? If I'm making the same commission rate on a month-to-month net 90 deal that I'm making on a 5-year multi-product bundle deal, I'm going to sell the monthly one because it's easier to sell. And you can't fault the seller for that. So I think there's a theme about AJ hit the nail on the head in terms of the seller trust and the time it takes to calculate commissions and automating the process, where that is core fundamental to our business. Our evolution in how we think about conversations with CROs is it's not even just time and emotion from your team. It's also, are you using this incredibly, incredibly expensive comp plan? You're paying more for your comp plan than you're paying for any piece of software you have in your pocket right now. Are you using that to its best advantage? And a lot of times the answer is no.
And Ryan's 100% right in saying that you're a CRO, you're sitting there frustrated with the right type of revenue or the wrong type of revenue in this case. But the question that I would put back onto the audience, and what are you doing about it? How are you the change agent in this and really being able to drive and taking a look at this and saying, you know what, our capacity or rather than just the VP of finance or the CFO coming to me and like telling me what it should look like, how can I best set up my team to do this? Ryan came to me just yesterday and said like, hey, we're thinking about these type of roles and these type of levels. Here are the numbers of this. This is going to be transparent for the team. Like, this is what I'm thinking about. Do I sign off on this as the CEO versus the other way around? And I think that's one area where we're excited. I mean, we're excited when we're down there in Miami to help CROs that feel like frustrated, that feel stuck because there's so many different stakeholders in this, to help them get them unstuck by being proactive and thinking about the yearly planning cycle that we're in right now and really making a fundamental change to their teams and how their teams think about comp.
A lot to unpack there. So thanks for diving in. AJ, there's probably not too many people who would take that leap and would want to take that challenge face face on. I mean, there's so many different routes that you probably could have gone, but it's leaders like you who are making the charge and making the difference. And
A quick
Ryan
funny
hopped
story
on.
about that. When I moved back to Philadelphia, I was like, I want to get out of software. I'm done with software. And I was like, can I open a car wash? Should I like had business plans for all these things that weren't software. And then I like had this issue and I was like, no, I have to do this. I'm like passionate about. So we could have been like having the podcast about Bruno's car washes of Greater Philadelphia right now. I'm disappointed in that.
Hey, there's always the future. We don't know where this is going. So the Millennium Alliance is a great place for those executives, those CROs in particular, and we'll find this out in Miami, but they are all looking for help in tackling these challenges. And one of the things that you mentioned, AJ, was this new approach and how we're tackling it because we're dealing with people's livelihood. This is their pay, this is their compensation. So, Ryan, I want to pose this question to you about the differences. What are the key differences between the traditional way of compensation and this new approach and the new approaches that QuotaPath is bringing to comp planning?
Yeah, so I would say the traditional way of compensation planning is your comp plan effectively is a byproduct. So you have a financial plan over here. Hey, we need to grow the business from 250 million in ARR this year to 345. And this is the model, and here's how we're going to do it from like a go-to-market perspective. And then completely separately, with no connection at all, is your compensation plan. And oftentimes it's a compensation plan where people feel like, oh, I have to build a comp plan because I promised these sellers that I hired 50% of their take-home pay is variable, and I have to figure out some sort of math. And oftentimes, as organizations evolve, these compensation plans become more and more complex, and thus less and less interpretable and less motivating because they're trying to have all these safety nets. Oh, I don't want to pay this person too much if they bundle all these rates together. And so the old way of compensation planning historically is siloed, one. Two, not incredibly motivating for the seller in her day-to-day job. Like the comp plan is not dictating how she's acting. And then three, has all sorts of rules and gotchas so that to protect the cash of the business and so that the seller isn't feeling truly inherently motivated. We feel like instead of a compensation plan being a byproduct, and I'm sure a lot of the CROs listening to this call deeply empathize with or feel that pain historically, we feel like a comp plan should be a performance driver. You should take your financial plan and say, hey, what is the one metric this business has to move this year, and what are the up funnel metrics into that metric? So if you have to improve your gross revenue retention, for example, how do you make sure that every single role, from a BDR to a marketing team member to an account executive to an account manager, has accelerators on their compensation plan that if they hit those, bring in revenue that's tied to improving your gross revenue retention? So maybe you're getting extra dollars for selling ICP customers or driving longer term contracts or renewing and converting to multi-product renewals. So the thought is the financial plan leads into the compensation plan. The drivers of the compensation plan, two or three, pizza topping style, you don't want more than two or three pizza toppings, are the components that tell the seller how they should prioritize their pipeline and their day. And in QuotaPath, sellers are comparing every day their amount they can earn in commissions if they close deal A versus deal B. And oftentimes deal B is a smaller deal in terms of revenue, but because it's a better deal for the business, better margin, multi-product, longer term contract, what have you, the seller actually will make more money selling deal B. And in making more money, the business will be happier. So I worked with a customer a couple months ago, for example, who wanted to drive more multi-year contracts. And so when they started working with QuotaPath, they had less than 5% of their revenue was in multi-year contracts. They accelerated the rate of commission for the new business team if they would sell multi-year contracts. They could see that visibly in QuotaPath, how much money they would make. And that's gone up to over 20% of their revenue in multi-year contracts. So it's use the compensation plan as a tool to drive your team to deliver the right outcomes for your business.
I mean, thanks, Ryan, for kind of diving into that. And one of the things that I do like to discuss on a podcast that excites me the most are the success stories and the examples of where this has proven to be successful. Uh, I would love to see if there's any specific example that stands out to you, Ryan, um, about where a company has successfully implemented this new approach, within their enterprise and the resulting benefits and the top benefits that they've experienced as a result of this implementing this new approach.
Yeah, so there's been a bunch. I mean, the example I just gave was a customer that I worked with really recently. There are examples across the board. We had a customer who was looking to attach a new product and go to market successfully with a new product, and so accelerate their commission rates in terms of uh, if a team member was able to sell a new product. We've had customers who have been really focused on raising their ASP, average selling price of their contracts, who have accelerated rates for deals above a certain size. So we've gone through this consultative process with a lot of our customers. And when you start to work with QuotaPath, we go through this with you, which is, hey, as you go into 2025, what's the big metric you have to move next year? And how do you then align every single person who's earning variable comp to care about moving that metric? So in the gross revenue retention example, the BDR is getting extra points for ideal customers, for booking demos with ideal customers. The marketing team is getting extra dollars for bringing pipeline from ideal customers. Okay, ideal customers are now in the pipeline more. Then the sales team is getting extra commission points for closing longer term contracts and with ideal customers. And then the account management team is getting dollars for every renewal where they expand the length of the relationship from a 2-year to a 5-year contract. So all of a sudden, you've taken these teams who tend to operate a little bit in a silo, if we're being honest, right? Marketing, BDR, sales, account management, and you've aligned them all towards moving this one key metric. And so you can then track in QuotaPath, hey, how are these up funnel metrics, percentage of revenue in multi-year deals, percentage of revenue from ICP, how do those feed into a metric like gross revenue retention over time? And that's the goal. That's the winning formula for go-to-market teams.
Yeah, and Connor, I'll use a really tactical example with Ryan himself. So when Ryan first joined the company, 70% of our customers were on monthly subscriptions. And it was something that Ryan identified that was like, this isn't sustainable. Immediately moved the incentive structure from that monthly to an annual, and it completely flipped. Like within a quarter, we flipped the business to 70% annual, and it's continued to progress that way. So his example of multi-year for GRR, it was true for us for monthlies to annuals, and we saw that immediately and used QuotaPath successfully in that way because our reps, of course, as Ryan said, use QuotaPath as their own dog food. We eat our own dog food, and that's something. Drink our own champagne. You're not allowed to say, or you can say eat your own dog food, but drink your own champagne, whatever it is. And we do that, and it's been great to see. So we are our own test study, but like what we found in the market, it just resonates so well because this is the challenge. This is the problem that every revenue leader struggles with is like, I have this number. How do I galvanize my entire team behind it? And you just really have to understand what are the levers that can actually move that. And that's where I think we've been able to come in and really have these consultative strategic conversations that it's not about ICM, it's not about incentive compensation management. It's about how can we help fundamentally show that you're driving the right revenue, you're driving the right outcomes, you're actually able to do this, and that's where this goes, extends far beyond the revenue organization into the executive team and even the board and those board level conversations.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is there are a number of tools in the market that automate the process of calculating and paying commissions, right?
Sure.
That to me, it's a better, faster Excel. It's like, okay, I'm just going to take this calculated.
Ivory Tower Excel
Yeah,
though. Ivory
and
Tower.
just make it, yeah, I'm just gonna make my ivory tower nicer and faster and clean, whatever. But the ultimately you don't have a comp plan so that you can calculate commissions faster. You have a comp plan. I mean, it's a fundamental question of why even have a comp plan in the first place. And you have a compensation plan to motivate your team to do things that are great for the business. And you can set up rules in your org to say you have to go do X, Y, and Z. But the truth is, your sellers are cash motivated. And so you're using the cash that you're paying them to drive them to do great things for your business. And so it's a win-win all around. And for us, we built the product in a way that is interpretable first. The comp plan is a thing that you have to fundamentally understand. If your seller doesn't understand the compensation plan, frankly, you just shouldn't have it because you're not motivating them to do much of anything. And you're just paying them dollars that aren't effectively driving incremental shifts in behavior. And that's the philosophy of this business is we want to arm you to drive incremental shifts in human behavior.
Yeah. I think, I mean, this is great. Even looking at the bigger picture of all of this, this, when talking about CROs, these are the people that are investing, making investments. They want to see ROI out of anything that they're investing in, any technology that they're implementing. And so kind of even affecting the bottom line of the business. How does this new approach really help align the sales teams with the overall business objectives? And I think, I mean, AJ, you alluded to this already, just by starting your company. So I think there's definitely a reason to have a technology and solution like QuotaPath on board and implementing this technology forward. But aligning sales teams is certainly sometimes not easy.
No, definitely not. And there's all different types of teams. I think in the remote culture and remote world we live in for our teams, that's something that I think CROs have also struggled with is how do you have that close connection and you're coaching your team, you're mentoring your team, you're talking about these deals in one-on-ones where it feels a little more impersonal than it was a couple of years ago. And I think that's why it's more important now than ever to make sure your teams are all aligned to that overall objective and that there's transparency across the board. So a big piece of this was just starting with that visibility, that like making sure the teams understood what their comp plans were. However, that's not a thumbs up there. That's not enough. You also have to ensure that it's the company objectives are clear. If you're just showing the reps a comp plan and it's completely misaligned, we have a customer that has it's called unified usage metric. Basically, if their customers adopt their platform, that's how they show their success. It's a North Star metric for them, but their teams aren't paid off of that metric. And so it's really confusing for the reps that they have this visibility into their comp plan. Their CEO is talking about this metric and trying to drive it, but it's not aligned to the actual comp plan.
I also think this does a really good job at relieving the tension that comes in compensation planning between the CRO and the CFO. We do a compensation trend survey every year, and one of the big things we ask is like, how do these leaders feel about the compensation planning process? And a number of them say, hey, there's real tension between the CRO and the CFO and the RevOps team member. And I think if everyone can kind of put down their boxing gloves a bit and just say, hey, look, what is the metric we're trying to move as this business? What makes us all successful? And then how do we build a compensation plan that helps the teams understand how they're impacting that metric as well? That becomes really, really powerful. So when I roll out comp plans with our customers or roll out comp plans internally here at QuotaPath, the biggest thing I'm focused on is the context. Like, why am I paying you a higher rate for this type of revenue? It's because this type of revenue is expected to do X later down the line, or these customers are expected to do X later down the line. So it's aligning teams that have historically been in a little bit of conflict, if we're honest, a revenue team, a finance team, an ops team, all towards driving the team towards the same collective goal.
When it comes to technology adoption, there's certainly going to be challenges involved, especially in terms of organizational structure, size of the enterprise. Uh, and just curious about where you've seen the challenges arise in particular areas of when implementing this technology. So, just in terms of this new approach to comp planning, what are the challenges that you're seeing that are pretty consistent, and in ways that QuotaPath helps them overcome these challenges?
I'd say the biggest one I see initially is teams not knowing how their team can impact a fundamental metric of the business. So if you think about QuotaPath, every single employee on QuotaPath is in a variable compensation plan. And so that's been an evolution for us over time. It's been an evolution for a number of our customers over time, as to say, okay, I work in engineering. How does my work tie to this like revenue goal for a business, for example? And so it's important to go through that thought exercise at first to say, what are the metrics that let's say you're trying to improve your average contract value. Maybe your growth in revenue this year is entirely dependent on moving more from mid-market into enterprise. So you need to start signing on larger and larger customers. Okay, then how do you look at the jobs to be done by the people in your company and say which of these jobs are aligned to up funnel metrics from average contract value? So maybe it's your engineering team is releasing a number of new features that enable your go-to-market team to sell into the enterprise. And so maybe you're compensating them based off of successful delivery of those features, let's say. Or maybe your account management team is doing specific product-based target expansion to sell multiple lines of your product to raise average contract value. So what you need to have written down for each team is your fundamental hypothesis. If this team improves this metric, this will improve our core metric in this way. And so getting that aligned at the start of compensation planning is fundamental to then motivating those teams to sell more of that kind of like up funnel metric to then be aligned to a down funnel. So, classic example would be if you want to improve gross revenue retention, you sign more longer term deals. You have to have confidence that selling more longer term deals will improve your gross revenue retention, one. And two, you have to have a way to track the percentage of your revenue that's in these longer term deals in like a pre-post capacity. And that's where QuotaPath really steps in and helps.
We've been kind of touching upon the relationships between the different teams, but I think it's important to know how the new approach really does impact this relationship between sales and operations and finance teams. What are you seeing there?
Well, I think with those teams, when you look at it, when you kind of back up a second, it depends on the size and scale of the team. There's obviously a level of complexity that could exist at a $2 billion company that doesn't exist at a $10 million company.
Yeah.
So
I should have probably I probably should have made that
well,
note.
Sure. And so size and scale are definitely there, but I think what we see as once we can even talk early stage, once you hit $10 million in revenue, there's a level of complexity. You typically have a revenue operations, you have a finance leader, and then the hierarchy just builds and builds from there. You're building business units and that scales all the way up. A lot of what Ryan is talking about in the different technology pieces is true. And it definitely, the foundation of how you built some of that architecture, that back end, if you will. So you have the back end in terms of all of the plumbing with operations, and how does your data get into a data warehouse? What type of ETL does it go through, and how does that get dumped, and how can you actually manipulate it and look at it is really important factor for it. I think there's so many types of customers that when we go and talk to them, they don't even have visibility into some of the other organizations, let alone maybe even their own org. They're challenged with it. So that's the first and foremost, is I think where you all want to be working off of that same set of data. So if you let's say you have a finance leader that's going and asking RevOps for what does that look like? How do we uh, build this comp plan? Well, first and foremost, let's like say someone is owning and accountable to those plans. So they're taking ownership of it. So Ryan, from a revenue operations, we see that a lot living in RevOps. You also see it finance at scaled organizations. So someone is taking that maybe in the FP&A org, and they're running with it, and they're going to all the different stakeholders. They're getting their feedback, saying like what's worked well, including the sellers, like what's working well, what's not working well, what do you want to see change. So they're taking all of that, kind of combing through it. Then they're looking at the cost structure, and they're starting to understand how does it fit the business. What are the unit economics of this to fit, and they're putting that down. Then they're doing capacity planning, and what are the headcount look like? And then they're trying to do some maybe level of benchmarking. What's everyone else out there? And that's where they actually usually come across QuotaPath. They're like, hey, let me Google a comp plan. And we call these folks, they might have inconsistent incentives. You know, some of their teams are being comped on this thing, and it might be different than this other objective. And so they're coming to us saying, like, how do we actually align those? So then our goal is to take our adaptable platform and leverage them being really engaged and leaning into this process to help bring them forward to here's the outcomes you want to achieve, here's compensation. This is the winning incentives. This is the winning formula. And that's what we're ultimately trying to achieve here, Connor, is pushing them forward. And when you do that, you have all of these departments aligned to the same outcomes, and they're all speaking the same language.
And I think it's easy for us to say, right, on a podcast here, how could you possibly be in a world in which these teams are like misaligned or what have you? But like we've worked in these organizations with, you know, thousands or tens of thousands of employees where, you know, sometimes as you get into more of these larger teams and as your revenue gets in the hundreds of millions and billions, like you have these kind of siloed organizations and it's hard to have everyone working in the same way. I think what I would say to the CROs listening is that's fundamentally your job. Like your job is to ensure that every morning when everybody in your team wakes up and they go to figure out what they're going to do today, they're prioritizing bringing in revenue or retaining revenue that's best for your business. That is, and if they don't know what that looks like, then you have a problem. And that's where a tool like QuotaPath can really help. How do you use software to motivate a person as they start their day to work on revenue that's great for your business? That's like your P0 problem you have to go solve. And we are not naive to the fact that these things can snowball over time. And then all of a sudden you're paying a team member more for closing a month-to-month deal than you're paying for closing an annual deal because of differences in discounting rates, right? Like these things do happen, but you have to say, okay, does this actually make sense? Like why am I paying this person to do this thing? And is that thing aligned to what's great for the company?
Excellent points, both of you. You guys work with enterprises of all sizes, both big and small.
Yes. Yep. We have customers that are 5 commissionable reps all the way up to almost 1,000.
Yeah.
So definitely big and small, and see all different types of orgs. And I'll tell you, the biggest are usually the most screwed up. So you're small, they actually have it pretty simple. They keep things simple as we recommend, like Ryan said earlier around the pizza toppings. When you have a lot of legacy historical baggage that you're carrying, it's easy to get screwed up, and in this area as well as other areas. But how do you start over at that point? How do you get change management? There's a lot of challenges at the larger scale companies that we work with.
Well, the unfortunate truth too is what the teams are trying to do as they add their next nested if statement to their long formula. I mean, the burden of, or like the barrier to make that is quite low, right? So you could say, hey, for this product, I'm going to change the rate from this to this, and this product, I'm going to change the rate from this to this. And you just write it into this long, nasty formula that you have. And so actually making those changes so that you have this really kind of obtuse, confusing compensation plan, physically making them is not all that difficult. The problem is the more and more things you add, the less and less you motivate the people to do what's great for you. Like if I saw a comp plan the other day where a team member had 64 different rates they could earn in commissions. So they had 64 different commission rates they could earn on a matrix of two variables here and here. And so on every deal, they're trying to figure out, okay, like what commission rate am I going to earn on this deal and why? And they were all like fractions of a percentage apart. So there's no real differentiating thing to tell them to go do this or this. And then they freeze and you talk to the reps and they say, hey, at this point, I'm so confused by my comp plan. I am just going to close the easiest deals to close. I am just going to close the deals that are fastest. They have the worst terms for the company, but I know I can earn commissions, so I'm just going to kind of hammer through closing as many of these as possible, which is exactly the opposite of what this 64 grid compensation plan is trying to get these people to do. And so that's the question. Do you fundamentally believe that your compensation plan is a tool on your behalf versus a behind the scenes after the fact thing? I think the average CRO wants to say yes, and they need to modify their compensation plans in order to achieve that. And that's where we try to help companies.
I mean, I want to build off that exactly to your point, Ryan. In terms of measuring success for any individual within the organization, what key metrics should be at least considered when designing a performance-driven comp plan?
We talked a little bit about it before, which is the metrics that you're looking at are the percentage of revenue that's great, right? So, I mean, there's classic things like your quota attainment, and you're always going to have like a vertical component of the compensation plan that's banded attainment. But the truth is, it's your great sellers are the ones who drive a higher percentage of their revenue that is great. So if you have one seller who's, closing ideal long-term contracts and another seller who's mainly closing short-term, terrible payment term contracts, you kind of feel it in your bones. You're like, I really gravitate towards the seller who's closing revenue that has great retention, great expansion, is great for the business. And so how do you quantify that? It's the percentage of the revenue they're bringing in the front door that meets that criteria. And that's like, you think about tracing the path. That's the path that we're trying to help people trace. Because people do know, they feel it. They're like, oh, a new opportunity comes in. Who am I going to give it to? I'm going to give it to this person. They don't quite know why. And it's probably because they're closing revenue that's great for your business.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, to your point, Ryan, I think I think it's important to know that the new approach to this is going to be effective long term, and that the solutions that we're providing now that QuotaPath can help with are sustainable. So, AJ, curious about your thoughts and sort of kind of building kind of into the meat of all this, and what we've been talking about through this discussion is kind of ensuring that an organization's compensation plans are going to remain effective. And sort of how do they do this? How do they make sure that they do remain effective and relevant for their employees, and their business is sustainable over time using this new approach?
I would say from an approach standpoint, it's always there. Like their comp plan, the whole point of them to exist in the first place is to drive the right behaviors. It's why you do incentives in the first place. Show me an outcome and I'll show me an incentive and I'll show you an outcome. That's Charlie Munger. I just messed up my favorite quote for the course I did. I saw Ryan smirking over there as soon as I messed it up. And that exists. So comp plans for sales teams have existed for quite some time. So I wouldn't necessarily equate it to a new approach. What is new is saying like, hey, let's kind of like actually take a step back and make sure we're focused on it on a quarterly basis. A lot of times, or a monthly basis, even a lot of times, leadership will set it and forget it. They'll build a comp plan and then like say, we're not going to change anything or adjust anything for the year. But if you think about what happens during a business cycle during the year, it's ridiculous not to revisit it. You might have changes to your growth plan. I mean, it might be both good and bad. You might have a layoff and half your team is cut and you're like gone. Well, of course, you should realign your sales comp plan to the objectives because the objectives have changed. It doesn't make any sense why you wouldn't revisit that. Same thing if you just raise a round of funding and your team all of a sudden has doubled. Well, your growth plan has changed. So your incentives are going to change during that. And those are things that I think a lot of leaders get a little nervous about. They want to create predictability. They want safety and security that their team knows what they're getting paid. That's great. But if you look at it and you have quicker iterations, you're not moving the needle. You're not making massive changes to these plans on a daily, quarterly basis, maybe a little bit. So that's the thing that I would say is just, well, focus on it. Like actually pay attention to it. Don't let it be a bottom of the barrel activity that your company is doing. Actually make it a driver and be proactive with it so that you can use it how it was intended to drive the right outcomes. Pretty straightforward. I know we're being super redundant on this podcast around it, but I just want to hammer home at that point of like, look, I get it. You could use a tool for like QuotaPath for this, but if you're not doing this, just start to do the basic thing. Figure out why you have a comp plan in the first place and really follow that thread. Even if you're a sales leader and you don't feel like you have that empowered opportunity to make these changes, that's not true. You absolutely can.
It's interesting
Or if
comment
you
too. I would challenge a little bit the premise of stability. I think in your question you say how do you feel like you have a stable comp plan that supports your business growth over time? The truth is you can have a base component of your comp plan. Maybe it's just your quota and your attainments, but your comp plan should be reactive and reflexive to the needs of your business, right? So in how you're accelerating rates, how you're dealing with spiffs, how you're doing contests, like you should be able to fluidly and dynamically change those. I think the reason people get into these, I've had the same comp plan for 15 years. I talked to a customer the other day. It was like or a prospect who's soon to become a customer. We've had the same comp plan for 15 years. And it's like your business has not changed in 15 years. Like you don't have other things you want to tell those people to go do in the past 15 years. And the answer was no. And the answer was the answer was they want to make changes, but it's so hard to, right? So what you really want is a comp plan that has some stability and safety to AJ's point in terms of core on target earnings, but also has some things that you can sprinkle on as your business evolves that you can accelerate rates and change rates in different ways to be reactive to the changing nature of your business. And so great thinkers on compensation plan design are actually evolving their thinking on what they're motivating and why constantly. And that's where you are driving your people in real time to deliver greatness for you.
I think I want to finish the discussion on sort of looking where this technology could go, because so many discussions that I have, particularly on this podcast, I'm surprised for the last year, all we've talked about is AI and the solutions that are being implemented using such technology and kind of the path forward there. So, I'm curious about looking ahead, and I there's got to be a difference in within 15 years, things need to change. To your point, Ryan. Otherwise, that becomes stagnant, and there's no real path forward. So the role of technology is an interesting question, and when posed, I I'm still so new to this revenue space that I need your expertise on it, and we'll probably dive more into this as soon as the event comes and everybody's in the same room and discussing the challenges that they do have and the solutions that are going to pave the way for the future. Questions for you both. about the role of technology. What role is it playing in making these advancements and implementing and managing, performance-driven compensation plans?
Well, let's talk about AI
Yeah,
for
yeah.
first, because I think that that's the you mentioned it, and that's where the biggest disruptor in the next
Had
five
to.
years will, of course, be. Right. But I think that, both on both sides. So on one hand, I don't believe that generative AI replaces sellers in any way. Like I maybe it makes them more efficient. We can talk about that with tools, but as far as the human to human buying experience, the connection, I, especially in our business, we have found that actually people want more of that. They raise their hand more frequently. They get a free trial experience with QuotaPath so that they can have a part of the buying experience. At some point, they're like, I actually, as a RevOps or a finance leader, want to have this consultative call with Ryan and really better understand this. So that's first. And I think that that's something that gets discussed really, really often. The other side of it, in terms of like, how does like AI and help sellers become more efficient, there are absolutely gains to be made still, and we're still dialing those in. Like we've gone rogue almost with the amount of email spam and cadence that we send out and trying to use generative AI to help us. Yes, it can become more efficient, but I still don't feel like it's doing the thing that I said at the beginning, which is the human-human connection. And so it's being viewed as like total like ignore mode. And until we get through that barrier, which is going to be really tough to do, then we're actually making this world worse for ourselves. There are absolute value props and cases to be made where AI can be beneficial for a tool like QuotaPath. QuotaPath, for example, will have a release here in a few months. And it's fundamentally different than any of our competitors. We've looked at what was out there. It's a lot of chat body stuff. And for us, it's like, how can we help our customers get to time to value faster? How can they onboard quicker? How can they think about their plans and actually look at them more visually using AI, translate their PDF into something that they can actually tangibly see? And so we're really excited to launch that. And that's as far as I'll go with teasing what that is. But yeah, and Ryan has a few thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, I think Connor, one of your questions was, I mean, the crux of your question was how the role that technology as it evolves over time will play in variable compensation. I think, look, I mean, it's driving towards faster iteration, more real-time iteration on compensation plans. So if you think the old way was keep the same comp plan for every 15 years, or keep the same comp plan for a long time, never change it because it's too much lift to. The current way which we're driving is still with human intervention, where you're looking at the performance of your comp plan in QuotaPath and making changes in real time. Naturally, the future is, how does that even just be dynamic? How does your compensation plan become something that dynamically changes with the needs of your business automatically and motivates your sellers to do X, Y, and Z? AJ and I have talked a lot about the future state of things like, could you have your commission rate dynamically change, like in the same way that people robo advise? Could your commission rate robo advise go up or down as a function of the quality of this deal for the business, right? More dynamically. So all of a sudden, your commission rate is not this big table of 64 rates. It's, hey, these are the characteristics of the business or the characteristics of the customer that you're looking to bring on board. Here's what we're going to pay you as a commission rate based on the customer's propensity to be successful with us for a long period of time. So I think AI and the technology we're talking about is reducing the time to cycle, going from having the same comp plan for the past 15 years to having a base comp plan every year that every month or every quarter you're modifying to meet the needs of your business. In 10 or 15 years, we're going to be talking about dynamic variable comp that real time determines your commission rate as a function of the quality of the customer or something like that. So it's all about speed to lead and speed to cycle is kind of the big thing we think about here.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see where all this goes. I mean, we should hop on a podcast in 5 years' time just to check in and see where the technology is, and not only that, it'd be amazing to see where all the innovation that QuotaPath is paving the way. This is all, of course, before Bruno Car Wash opens up across the USA. I want to thank AJ.
It's coming. Don't worry. Bruno Car Wash. It'll be there before you know it.
I want to thank you, AJ, and you, Ryan, for joining the Millennium Alliance podcast, as a nice prelude to the event coming up in Miami, where we're going to be talking with CROs and really discussing the challenges and how QuotaPath, again, paving the way forward, using just great technology and great planning, and it's experts like you guys who have, again, we'll say this one more time, but leading the charge in this space that is not only brand new to the Millennium Live podcast, but new to Millennium Alliance in general. So thank you for being the inaugural one to do this, AJ. I know this must be a passion project for you, but Ryan being the CRO over there as well, I think it was important to bring both of you on at the same time as kind of this dual guest to be able to discuss this and really for anybody in revenue operations in the sales leadership space can really take away from this podcast. I would love to do a part 2 eventually, and can't wait to meet you guys in person. So thank you.
Likewise, glad to be leading the charge. Thanks, Connor.
Thank you, Connor.